Ooh, there she is.
Hello.
Holy smokes, my friend.
Nice to see you again this week.
So nice to see you. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah.
So I was just saying to everyone that, first of all, not only looking forward to seeing and hearing you, but number two, how fun are we having this conversation on a Friday? This is not like financial P&L, how to finance your business, how to think like an entrepreneur, how to have confidence. This is about sex, intimacy, and relationships for powerhouse women.
Hello.
Yes.
So I've got my vulva puppet here.
Of course you do. Can I borrow that? That is hysterical. I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah.
So I'm super thrilled to have you. I think, one of the things I wanted to just touch on today that I think could be interesting for people to listen to is just your perspective on being a powerhouse woman, having been self-actualized, right? You make your own money, you're driving your own business, you're articulate, you're confident, you're out in the world running things. And then how do you lean back into that feminine energy as the receiver and as the feminine and find what has, at least for me, been kind of realizing my own passions, my own intimacy, pleasures, and experiences that allow me to be taken care of, to be the receiver, and not to have to run shit. or be in charge. So talk to me about that dynamic that you see and how you help women like me or powerhouse women think through that.
Yeah. Well, and so, one of the words that we talked about on the podcast that I love, and I think it's misunderstood, is the word surrender. And because we, as powerhouse women, we strengthen ourselves and we gird ourselves to move through the world. And to move through, in the business world is still, often male dominated world. And like, when you're organized and you get shit done and you're dedicated and you're motivated and all of that is like this, like forward, heavy, make shit happen energy. And that can be good in the bedroom also sometimes. However, there's this piece of being able to relax, of being able to drop into your body, out of your head and into your body, about being able to surrender being in charge or needing to be in control. And that is a very vulnerable place to go. But what that opens up for us is this like juiciness of intimacy, of being seen and known and accepted and, melding into somebody emotionally and mentally and physically that I think most of us really desire in the long run. But it takes courage to do it. It takes intention to do it. And it takes courage to do it. And I think,
that's right.
One piece of advice I gave in the podcast is noticing where do you feel resistance inside with a partner in terms of letting go.
Right.
And that's a good place to start. Literally, where do you feel it? And breathe into it and try to let it dissipate some, but move towards that discomfort, befriend it, get to know it, understand it. And then you can move through it and make new choices.
And what are your thoughts about powerhouse women who are single on the first date, talking about what they do for a living or being asked about, what's your day job? What's your role? How do we be ourselves, be honest and candid without like turning the guy that we're on a date with into like timid or off-putting, or do you just kind of go with it? And how do you deal with that?
Well, so a couple of things. One is, I always want women to bring all of themselves and the best of themselves. And if part of that is your success in your business, then yeah, absolutely. Show up, be proud of that, be in that, and share from that space. But also feel free to share things you're struggling with. You know, like show some vulnerability, like the big picture of who you are. We all struggle with things. You know, and that takes courage to do. The other piece of it is then just make sure you're really asking a lot of questions to the other person, you know, and getting to know them and where are their passions and where are their successes and what lights them up and what do they struggle with, you know? So like this back and forth that we're all, regardless of how successful you are, how much money you have or not, we're all human beings who want to be seen and known and accepted for who we are. And we're trying to do the best that we can. Yeah. So I think, you know, showing up with the best of you, but also with the humility, knowing that, you know, we're all human and we still struggle. And then just trying to meet another human being in that place and give them the space then to talk and share stories also.
So for those listening and tuning in, Dr. Jenn Gunsaullus is a sex, relationship, intimacy expert. She's a sociologist. She's also an author. And she has this incredible library of videos. If you go to Dr. Jenn, In the Den with Dr. Jenn, you can't miss it. In the Den with Dr. Jenn. She has videos that are so candid and helpful because she brings a practical side to this, which is like one of the videos that I saw that I appreciated was you interviewed a man and said he told us as women how to give a blowjob from a man's perspective, and you interviewed him and then you show the how-to. I was like, wow, this is really taking a whole different approach to intimacy. But what I love is your mission and mantra, as I see it, and you correct me if you disagree, is just all about intimacy is based and rooted in transparency and in being who you are, being in your own body, heart-mind connection. So really dropping in and being willing to be yourself, lean into the surrender, if that's the right word, or the transparency of being who you are and claiming that. And then allowing for the conversation to be open around saying, this is what I like. This is how I like to be held. This is how I like to be touched. This feels good. Being able to have communication. And all of these things, you're taking in some ways a lot of maybe the misfiring or miscommunication between relationship and intimacy and helping people find their pleasure and passion and find out who they are.
Yeah.
Right? Is that really
and know that
your
we're
life's
always
work?
Changing. Like, you know, who I was at 25 is different than who I was at 45, you know? And then especially as women, like our bodies, our pleasure, our desire, our interests, how we want to be touched, it's always evolving. And allow it to have the space. And we could think we're so sure about what we like and don't like. And then you meet a new partner and you're like, son of a bitch, I had no idea. Like, this is hot.
Right.
Like I didn't know, or I've never been touched like this. Yeah. Or I feel so safe with this person that I feel like I can relax in new ways. And so, and that's ideally, we're always, you know, evolving in that way. So, yeah. And I really, you know, I you know, you were talking about my videos. I really like to take what I call, you know, a holistic approach to sex. And so that's everything from the physical aspects, the nitty gritty of how to give a blowjob, to the mental components and always be learning and be in a growth mindset. And then the emotional pieces, which is everything from, you know, love and desire to shame and fear and anxiety to, you know, the social components of what did you learn growing up and what gender role socialization did you learn and who are you wanting to be in this world. And then the spiritual components, which mean a whole lot of different things to different people, but at least at a basic level of like, you know, are you bringing all of you and the best of you and having experiences that you think raise both of you to another level. So yeah, this big picture approach, because that's what our sexuality is. That's the best of sexuality, that it's this really nuanced, complex juicy, ever evolving, all aspects of us, and to be able to bring all aspects of us in that way. That's how we really feel seen. And that's where you have the opportunity to have sexual experiences that can be transcended.
Right. And talking about next level, because we talked about this on the podcast that we did this week, and the Potential to Powerhouse podcast, which you can find on Stitcher and Google and Apple Podcasts all over. Dr. Jenn's is by far the most titillating and probably the most candid. But I think there's a lot to be said, especially for strong powerhouse women who are now claiming or next leveling all aspects of their life and really wanting to experience, at least for me and the circle and network of women that I surround myself with, are all having conversations about what does that next level of sexuality, intimacy, experimentation, like things that maybe we were told growing up, like we don't do that or you don't talk about that. Mm-hmm. Like all of my girlfriends are talking about it.
So cool.
And they're so empowered because here they're made fortunes, they're super successful, their careers are tracking, their kids are now out of the house, their bodies are no longer maybe the machine that it was to just like produce, have children, go to work every day, burn the candle at both ends. Yeah. Now they're like, wait a second, this whole pleasure thing, like, hold please, let's experiment with this.
Yeah, like it's right? And it's because that is not a part of most any sex education for most girls growing up still, which is insane. And we have access to vibrators and we have access to all of this great information online, but I would still say that's not, when I talk to college women, them embracing their bodies, feeling embodied and like really present in a sexual encounter, knowing how they like to be touched and what feels good, and then knowing they have a right to that, and then how to express that with a partner and experience it. All of those pieces are not there for almost any young women still in today's society. So, that pleasure piece is its own, because it's vulnerable, right? It's vulnerable to want something, and then it's vulnerable to know what you want and then to ask for it, because then you could be judged for that or stigmatized or rejected for it and not get it. And it's a lot harder. It hurts a lot more to ask for what you want and not get it. So sometimes we just block that shit down and pretend we don't need it or want it. But that's the stuff you look back on in life and you're like, oh, I wish I had done this different. I wish I had the courage. And because it does, like I said, it takes courage to do all, which sounds crazy. Like it takes courage to experience sexual pleasure, but for many women, it really does. And to spend the time on that and know that you deserve that type of time. You're worthy of that. Right.
And forever, like think about it, going back in time, Playboy clubs for men, strip clubs for men, there's so much of the industry, I think, that's openly shown and discussed and almost, very accepted around these gentlemen clubs and these kind of male focused sexual avenues for pleasure and for experimentation and conversation and community, right? As men get to formalize that I mean, I've not driven by a male strip club recently where it's like nude men. Have you? Because I would probably stop in and say, what's going on in here? And I mean,
you got to go to Vegas generally for that.
But my point is like, why is that? Why is that that's so frequent and common?
I mean, I'll honestly say it does come down to, there's a couple pieces, but the bottom line piece of it is probably just the financial piece. There are less women who are seeking paid ways less heterosexual women who are seeking paid ways of being with men or men undressing in the way. And it's a big market for men of porn, cam girls, of strip clubs, of prostitutes, men going to men and men going to women. Women just don't seek that out in the same way, and don't pay for it in the same way. So, and then you put on top of it, we've also been socialized that would not be okay, or that we shouldn't do that, or we shouldn't want that. So I do think we'll be seeing more of that, but I'll never forget. Oh my gosh, I don't know how many years ago it was. It was probably like 14 years ago. I had been to some strip clubs with women stripping for men. And then for the first time I was at like this kind of club that was men stripping on stage for like women in our audience and group of girlfriends. And boy, did it have a different vibe. Now,
Wow.
if you went to Vegas, it would probably be different, but the number of women who, nobody wanted to go on stage. And I remember this one man came out to the audience, to this one woman and this group of women, and they just didn't want to be touched.
Yeah.
And it's in the same way versus men that are like, bring it, and not all of them, enjoy that. And some of them are uncomfortable, or if they have, girlfriends and they're in relationships, but it couldn't have been a more different vibe. And then I did go to like, probably the Thunder Down Under or something like that in Vegas a few years ago.
Yeah.
I forgot about this. And I remember this experience, and it was like, it was very different, and almost not sexy in some ways, because some women would buy something for another woman or something. And then I watched this woman getting a lap dance, and I remember she looked so uncomfortable.
Right.
And like almost like it was non-consensual for her.
Yeah.
You know? And so, because I remember keeping my eyes on her and just checking in, like, are you okay? Which is so funny, because I don't think men would ever think to do that with another man.
No.
But the thing is, men are supposed to enjoy that, but not all do. So there's multiple reasons. Like, we're just biologically wired differently, and then we're certainly socialized differently.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. I think it's such an interesting conversation, though, because one of the things Gwyneth Paltrow says, which I love her so much on a personal basis, professionally, all aspects of her. And she's super candid. She's like, look, my Goop business was like vibrators for 6 months. I mean, my biggest, when COVID hit, she wasn't selling cashmere wraps and she was selling her $1,000 gold bulleted vibrator. And that was her, her big business, and it continued to be so. So anyway, I feel really like the world is changing, at least around these conversations,
which is so good. Yeah.
That it's not at least just this one-time situation in which we're starting to kind of have conversations. And, as you'll hear on the podcast, some of the things that my girlfriends are doing and talking about, as you've said to me, that is so LA, Tracy.
It's so LA.
Just know that when you hear this conversation, I'm sharing from my perspective what I'm hearing, but I understand that people are figuring this out as they go, but it is really about feeling comfortable in our own skin, vulnerable, and feeling self-actualized. And this idea of even women openly having multiple partners, or being able to have kind of a free-flowing dating experience. I just saw Sophia join. We've had these conversations about this idea of just like, I don't want to necessarily, have a boyfriend right now. I'm kind of really happy, being open and dating and like free flow. And the reaction to that is also like hesitant, questioning, and really like a little, can be judgy depending on where it's coming from, right?
For sure.
And so this idea of like, why don't you want to be monogamous and have a single partner? Is that really, why is, and what does that really mean about you? And
no, there's so many components around women's bodies and women's sexuality of undoing the shame, the judgment, the expectations, like the little box that we're supposed to live in, regardless of whether it makes us happy or not, and learning how to grant ourselves permission to step outside that box and start exploring new things that feel right for us. And it's not all going to be perfect, but that's the only way we learn, through trial and error. by putting ourselves out there. Like, it's literally the only way we learn things in life, and it's the only way we grow. And so some things might not work out great, and it's okay to be like, okay, I tried, didn't love it, didn't work out, not for me, but I tried.
Yeah.
You know, but giving yourself permission to try and make mistakes, and be uncomfortable and be awkward and have conversations you've never had before. Like, that's really at the heart of creating a lifelong, you know, happy relationship with yourself and happy sexual relationship with others, is this openness of trying new things and being creative and being kind to yourself and being kind to others, and just keep throwing yourself out there.
And do you see women who have made it materially or financially at a certain level where they have hit a threshold willing to go out on the limb and try things more openly and more willingly? Or do you think it has nothing to do with socioeconomic status?
Yeah, because we mentioned this on the podcast. I do think sometimes, right, you can hit a level of, right, if you're financially and business-wise successful, that confidence, you can, you know, consciously, intentionally carry that over to other areas. Like, I've worked hard, I deserve this. I'm giving myself permission to totally put myself out there in new ways. But in terms of folks who were trying polyamory or getting into tantra or kink or swinging or going to sex clubs, that's all across socioeconomic status. That is, like, you know, I think a lot of times it's just finding a partner who's interested in the same thing, or that you want to explore it together, or that you have a friend who shared that with you. Or for some folks, they hear it on something like this, or they watch a TV show, or they hear a podcast or read a book, and they're like, I didn't even know that was a thing. And they just start Googling and looking in their area. So no, you know, sexual desire and sexual interests and relationship styles, that completely runs the gamut, across socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, religion probably would be a playing factor, you know, because the more sort of traditionally religious somebody is, probably, it doesn't mean they're not interested in stuff like that, but the less likely they would be to try it, in that it just doesn't match their religious values. So, but otherwise, no, all across the board.
So is it possible, and I'm curious because I do plan at some point to likely get married and choose a monogamous lifestyle and partner on a go forward long-term basis. Yeah. I'm not in that mindset today, but I think at some point I will decide that that's, like, I've had enough fun. Now it's time to think about where I want to spend my travel time, my Thanksgivings, like build a life with someone. I guess my question to you is it possible to have hot sex in a great, intimate, long-term relationship with a monogamous partner 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Is it possible?
I'm going to say for most people, it's hard. There are occasionally, like, there was a research a while back that took like new couples that had only been dating like 6 months or something like that, and then a handful of like couples that had been married for like 20 years but had really active sex lives, and they put them in an fMRI machine and scanned their brains and then had them look at a picture of their partner and think about their partner. And what they found is that there was like this handful of long-term couples whose brains lit up in the same way as our brains light up in an early relationship. Most people don't have that, though. So I think there is, occasionally you get couples who both have high desire, are well matched in the sexual realm. Honestly, I think some of that is like a physiological, biological thing that you're kind of programmed with. You're pre-programmed, and they've found each other and they're able to maintain that. And then they're also like compatible for each other and respect each other and communicate and love each other. And they're able to do that. That is not the norm. I hate saying it, but it's just really not. And that's what I work with, long-term couples who have mismatched desire levels that have lost the passion, because it's really hard, especially the design of our relationships generally is You've got work, you've got kids, you've got friends, you've got all of these other priorities. You've got social media that's always grabbing your attention. If you're not really working on being intentional on how to love your partner the way they want to be loved, how to make time, and how to be willing to think outside the box and be creative in your sex life, then it often gets lackluster and predictable. And you just kind of go through the motions. You know what works and you go through the motions, but that's not passion. But passion comes from newness, excitement, mystery. So like, couples that are in long-term relationships that are thinking outside the box in ways of like, well, how about we go to a sex club and we just watch other people? Or how about we try a tantra class and try some spiritual sexuality and playing with sexual energy? Or how about we play with some power play in the bedroom of who's in charge and who's going to be blindfolded and tied up, and that brings newness and excitement and mystery again. Yeah. So I think for many couples, you got to nip it in the bud when you start to have some sexual difficulties. And that's the problem most couples don't, because we're just not trained. We're not taught to know what to do. And it hurts our feelings, or we feel rejected, or we feel guilty, and you kind of brush it under the rug. And then there you are 7 years later, like, oh shit, how did we get here? And then you've got all of this built up resentment and all of these patterns to try to undo, then to even get back to a point that you could start building a new foundation for a new sex life. And that's hard, because often couples don't trust each other now in the bedroom. Right. So is it possible? Yes. Some people will more naturally come by it. Most folks will have to be really intentional and work on it. Right. And have the, sort of the courage and the patience and the willingness to spend time on it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is really the crux of the conversation that we had this past week. And if you want to learn more about what Dr. Jenn does, how she helps couples, the conversations, the intimacy, and I'd say transparency, I would definitely look her up. She's based in San Diego. You take remote clients as well.
Yeah, I got clients around the world.
Yeah. And I would say, I'm fortunately at this point in my life in a place where I am really clearly choosing to spend time with the people that make me happy, and enjoying myself and my being single and having that experience. But I know at some point, it's always really good to have a third person to go and talk to, especially someone like yourself that has such bandwidth and expertise in this area of like, how do we get back to intimacy? How do we get back to pleasure? How do we get back to feeling fulfilled? And then how do I also do that and express myself, what I like, what my desires are? So I'm excited to have had this conversation with you. And I look forward to hearing people's feedback on the podcast, and
I'm excited.
We'll regroup, but this is important conversation, because a lot of the women that are in my circle really need some guidance here, and need to know that there's some thoughts around this topic.
And thank you for seeing the value in these topics and integrating it into your approach to helping cultivate powerhouse women. I appreciate that.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's such an important part. Like, we're whole people, right? You can't just look at our P&L and business we built and all the kind of the outside accolades. It's like, if you're not happy in your intimate self, if you're not happy with your intimate partner, kind of nothing else works. That's my philosophy, because it's the root of who we are. So I find this to be like a really, really important topic personally. Yeah. So thank you. Have a great Friday, guys.
Likewise. Have a great weekend.
All right.
Take care.
Soon. Okay. Bye.